refugees that the U.S. has taken in from Syria since the beginning of their war in 2011. Other countries such as Sweden have taken in more than 53,000, and that was in 2015 alone, not including the other 4 years. So if other countries can bring in more refugees from the war, why can we not? So there are families, parents, civilians that would like to get themselves and their children out of Syria to keep themselves safe. So in order to come into the U.S., they have to go through an 18-month process, which is very extensive. There's 20 steps to it. And I know most of you are probably thinking, Syrians, I don't know any refugees, we live in Brookville, small town, barely know any international travel except for maybe the foreign exchange students. But if you let in terrorists, that could affect you, because I'm sure most of you have families that live all around the country. So if you let in a terrorist and they go to that city, that could potentially harm your family or yourselves if they come here. So today we're going to talk about the Syrian civil war, the extensive acceptance process they have to go through to become a refugee, and what the U.S. can do to accept more people. So we're going to start out with discussing the war. New York Times recently released a picture of a little boy in the back of an ambulance. Now this little boy, he was covered in dust, dirt, mud, bruises, blood, anything you can think of. It was hard to tell that he was a little boy at all. He was only 5 and his name was Amran Daknish. He was found after the airstrikes in Aleppo in a building that had been crumbled. He was one in 12 children that day that are under the age of 15 that had been treated, and those are just the ones they found. Most they don't find. They're still in the buildings, they're dead, their bodies are somewhere. So this happens every day. Most want to get out of the country, they want to save their children, they want to save their families. So we're going to talk about the refugee acceptance process that they have to go through in the United States. So there are 20 steps. They have to register with the United Nations, then they have an interview, and after that they get accepted for refugee status if they do well in their interview. Then they interview with the State Department of Contractors. They have a minimum of 3 background checks. They have to have 3 fingerprint screenings. They have to have their photo taken. And then if they're from Syria, they're lucky enough to have another interview. They interview with Homeland Security. They have screenings such as contagious diseases. They have to go through a cultural orientation class. And then they have a multi-agency check before leaving for the U.S. And once they get into the U.S., they have to go through the airport security. So let's talk about what other countries are doing about this issue. The European Union alone took in over 1 million refugees just in 2015. So most of them were headed toward Sweden or Norway. So let's talk about Sweden. Sweden allows some permanent residencies, but most only get 3-year temporary, and then they have to reapply, and if they aren't accepted, they have to find somewhere else to go. So Sweden helps them pay for their food, their water, their shelter, any necessities that they need. They pay for health care. And because they pay for all this and don't expect them to pay back, their economy has declined. Norway, on the other hand, you have the 3-year renewable residency. So you're there, you have to reapply, same as Sweden, but they only help with your basic necessities. They only help with food and water and shelter. You have to apply for further assistance and you have to pay that back after. So their economy is much better. So I believe that if the U.S. would do the residence permits for 3 years and then you have to reapply until they can take the classes needed to become a citizen, if they keep the 18-month process, and then we have an official check them every now and then to make sure that they're being safe, that they're not harmful to society, I believe we could accept a lot more refugees. So how can you make a change? So FC is in a small town. FCHS is in a small town, and we don't know much. Like I said, no international travel, and you probably think you can't do much about it. So I encourage you to research more about Syria, research about the refugees, research about what they're going through, because I couldn't talk about it all in this 5-minute speech. So like the war, the hurting of the children, the families, and how the U.S. can rise to action and help people, how they can bring in more refugees and keep us safe. So discuss it on social media if you're scrolling through, because I know most of you have social media. If you're scrolling through and you find somebody and they mention a comment about it, comment back, tell them your opinion. Track politics and the new immigration policies, and when it comes time to vote, vote for the best option that you think.
Have you found like any numbers of how many Syrians we've accepted?
We've accepted 12,000. And that was in March. It was released in March, so I don't know how many we've accepted since then. But
Do you know what happened to that little boy?
I do not. I believe they treated him, and he's fine now.
Is he like in the U.S.?
Oh, I have no idea. It didn't really say.
Have population numbers been affected by the war?
I know in Aleppo they only have about a tenth of the population they had at the beginning. I read that from the New York Times. So 9/10 of their population has either left or been killed.
Do you know anything about how many kids we accept versus adults?
I do not. I didn't read anything about that. It just said refugees in general.
Yeah, you hear about the refugees going to Europe and America, but what about East Asia? You never hear of anybody fleeing to there. Why do you think that is? Or
I honestly have no idea. It might be, I don't know, Europe. I know it's because they probably accept more. They probably have a less harsh process to go through to be accepted. So I'd assume that's why.
You talk about the relocation being temporary. Do you actually foresee that being temporary or becoming permanent for all of these people after the 3 years?
In the U.S. or in Sweden?
Or either place?
Well, in Sweden it probably becomes permanent, but I think because they're taking in so many that they do the 3 years. That way if that person's doing okay and they have somewhere else to go, they can send them there and accept more refugees. I don't really know. The U.S. would probably become permanent. It would just be 3 year if they don't take the classes and they don't want to become a citizen like everybody